Hey guys, SpaceGuru5 here. Haven't had enough of me talking about music lately? Me neither. But this time, we're hitting a bit closer to home. You see, my opinions on music were really different back when I started out in this insular community. As hard as it can be to believe sometimes, I started making commentaries all the way back in 2011 when I was just a couple months shy of turning 14. My music taste was primarily formed by listening to classic rock radio. In fact, I can actually tell you that during the late 2000s, I spent many nights just staying up late and listening to 95.7 KGR FM in Washington. I was also more familiar with what my parents were listening to, which mainly comprised of alt-rock and pop songs from the 80s and 90s, as well as some old-school Tejano and mariachi music. This is why, even all these years later, my most familiar era of music spans the 60s to the 80s. I preface this because on the 7th of April 2012, I posted a video in response to a Justin Bieber fan. I had only been doing commentaries for a year at that point, and I was about to turn 15. My understanding of trolls was minimal, as was my knowledge and tolerance for the then current pop music, and I needed something other than Gupta 89 to cover for the moment. The only noteworthy thing about this video is that it's actually the very first time I used Wile E. Coyote as a commentary avatar. For the longest time, I didn't really care enough to make a response to my response. However, since I teamed up with Umbrus and Pepper Tay to tackle ignorant takes on music from some other schlub, I figured I might as well tackle this schlub right here. I'll start the video at the beginning of my old response, since that's really what I want to focus on anyway. So younger me, what have you got for us?
First of all, what you don't realize is that you wouldn't have your precious Justin Bieber if it were not for the contributions made by Michael Jackson, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and many other bands that were popular in the golden age of music. It's this ignorance in you type of fans that pisses me off the most.
In a 2011 interview with Vanity Fair, Justin Bieber actually cited Michael Jackson and the Beatles as two of his many inspirations, and as artists he considered the best. So you were actually correct to bring them up here. However, Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith aren't cited anywhere in here. So that leads me to believe you only brought up these artists because Bieber's Hot XOX did so. Also, did you really take someone with that username seriously? Come on, dude. More importantly, I find it kind of amusing that you think music from 1950 to 1979 was the golden age when the most you ever heard from the era was classic rock songs. And I can say this because I'm you. And even then, your assertion that Michael Jackson, Led Zeppelin, and Aerosmith were popular during that time period is a bit questionable. In regards to Michael, while he certainly was a breakout talent and started gaining traction with his solo career, he was mostly known as a member of the Jackson 5 during the time period you specified. His celebrity status reached its zenith during the 1980s and lasted all the way into 1993. What stopped their momentum? Well, you're too young to hear about that just yet, but ever since then his reputation has been pretty rocky, despite having several beloved pop songs to his name. In regards to Led Zeppelin, their only top 10 hit was at the cusp of 1969-1970 with Whole Lotta Love. They didn't have any top 10 hits in the 1970s, so their popularity clearly came later. In regards to Aerosmith, oh sure, they were reasonably popular during the 1970s, however, their era of commercial dominance didn't really happen until the late 1980s. I'm more than willing to bet most of you people listening right now are more familiar with their 80s and 90s hits than their 70s ones, even if you listen to classic rock radio. If you really think I'm bluffing about the chart stuff, check out this spreadsheet I've made compiling Billboard top 10s and 40s. It's a work in progress, admittedly, but I'm sure you can appreciate the fact that trying to record 66 years of pop music history is not a small amount of work. But you know, even ignoring all that, just because some artists played a key role in the development of a genre, doesn't mean someone else has to automatically like them. That's more of a personal preference than anything. Even if you think this person is a troll, why do you care? Not everyone is going to have the same preferences as you do, and that's okay.
Second of all, 60 years ago at the time of this recording was the year 1952, the year my grandfather was sent to fight in the Korean War.
What does that have to do with anything, dude?
1952 was 11 years prior to 1963, the year that the Beatles gained public fame and released their first single, which I will play a sample of at the end of this video. I really hate the fact that many people who dislike the Beatles, especially Justin Bieber fans, tend to exaggerate the age of the work of the Beatles. Their music won't be 60 years old until the year 2023.
Oh god, it's 2024. But in all seriousness, I think you're taking the "ugh, this music is 60 years old" crowd a bit too seriously. If you really think that opinion is worthless and just not worth listening to, then don't listen to it. I know that's easier said than done, but I can tell you now that people like that are still around in my time period. Don't worry about them, just shrug them off and keep doing your own thing, because really, who's gonna stop you? It's not like you can stop them either, so just fuck it, do your own thing, man.
Third of all, your conjecture about how stuff gets better as time goes on is definitely erroneous. If this were the case, then why are there so many music groups that pollute the music industry and mess it all up for everyone? How come many economies are on the verge of shattering and bringing forth the modern Great Depression? Riddle me that, little girl. Riddle me that.
I can tell you now that there's stuff from back then that you would have hated as well. I'm sure you don't particularly like Justin Bieber, probably because of his legion of screaming fans, as well as some other acts that you curiously don't specify. Well, I'm sure you wouldn't have taken too kindly to people like Ricky Nelson, Bobby Darin, Elvis Presley, Donny Osmond, Leif Garrett, Barry Manilow, or Sean Cassidy. Hell, even the Beatles in 1964 had a fan base like this, and their popularity was huge enough for there to be a top 40 hit called "We Love You Beatles." Frankly, that's just unheard of today. So yeah, even one of your own favorite bands started off as teen idols. Chew on that for a bit, kiddo. Also, get back to me when you take a listen to the Captain and Tennille or Disco Duck, because that's part of what the 70s were actually like. It's true that the musical landscape is constantly evolving as trends change, artists come and go, and more music gets made. And while you're free to like or dislike whatever you please, the bottom line is that you can gravitate towards whatever you like and no one will really care. You know, unless they're a prude or something. And besides, given that new technology has given us access to all this music you think is so great, maybe this person's conjecture about how stuff improves over time is not so erroneous after all. In terms of the economy, that's way beyond the scope of music, and it's just such a red herring. I get that you were just coming out of the Great Recession when you recorded this, but bringing that up in a discussion about music is such a dirty tactic. For shame. And that's the way this Roadrunner runs. Well, I'm not really sure what else I expected. I mean, for crying out loud, I was 14 when I recorded this. Clearly I didn't know any better and was still trying to find my voice online, so it's hard to be too harsh. But I will say, revisiting my older work really takes me back to when I was the new kid on the block. I honestly never expected to be at the commentary game for this long when I started out. And I certainly didn't think I'd get any sort of reputation in that time. You guys have watched me grow for a long time, and I appreciate those of you who are still around, even after all the garbage takes and genuine fuck-ups I've made along the way. My hope is that I can continue to grow as a person and entertain you guys for many more years to come. For the past 2 years, I've been working on a video series where I tackle some of my more infamous videos and reflect further on my past. It's not entirely finished yet, but my hope is to have it out within the next year or so. Please stay tuned for that, because it's actually one of my biggest passion projects of all time. That's about it for today, folks. I'm SpaceGuru5, and as always, take care.
Here I lie on my deathbed, recalling things said as my world slips away.
While he certainly was a breakout talent, always with the goddamn sports cars and motorcycles, I swear to God.